while I was busy seeking how to figure out how to be a medium, channeling came in or clairvoyance came in. Those were easy as pie for me. I didn't even have to really try. So sometimes the seeking path, like we think we're going one way, and the universe is like, haha, we've got them on the path. Now we're going to slide them into their true, where they're really supposed to be. So I think seeking is great, and you should seek with whatever interests you, but don't get too attached to where you need to go.
Enjoy this Wild Soul Gathering production. I'm Dr. Sandra Marie. Pour yourself a really tall glass of spiritual curiosity and join me for the Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious podcast. In the spirit of happy hour, cheers to some new insights, peace, revitalization, and perhaps an aha moment that may change your life. Welcome back to the 2024 Wild Soul Gathering Summit, Spirituality Explained. I want to introduce everyone to our next guest, Sara Wiseman. Welcome back, Sara. We recently did a podcast, and now you're here with the summit. Excited to talk again.
Just coming back for more. So excited. Thank you for having me.
Very cool. Sara, just for all of you guys watching out there, is a spiritual teacher. She's a visionary, a best-selling author who channels a monthly forecast and also writes a blog, The Divine Inspiration of Seekers and Soul Travels, which I personally enjoy very much. So thank you for that. Today we're going to be talking about discussing seeing from the soul's perspective. Sara, I feel like everyone on the planet's been awakened. I think some are conscious, some are unconscious, but I feel like most are sort of on that continuum in between. How would you describe seeing from the soul's perspective?
Thank you. Seeing from the soul's perspective is about, first off, it's looking from the bigger view. It's looking at this idea that we're not just here birth to death, but we're here birth to death, birth to death, birth to death, birth to death. So whether you believe in reincarnation or whether you want to look at it from this perspective of your ancestors after and before and after you, whether you want to look at it as just this idea that humanity continues, like you don't have to have a particular belief system to look from this bigger perspective. So that's one part of it, just looking that this lifetime is not the only thing that we're here for. The other way it is clear to me is that we are not isolated beings, me, Sara, you, Dr. Sandra. This is not who we are. We are fully connected, you, me, everyone listening, all humans, all beings living, all beings non-living, and we're connected by our consciousness or by our awareness. And so using that filter, I'm a conscious being and so is everything else, is sort of what I see as the soul perspective, versus looking at an ego perspective. I am Sara and I'm so great. Like that's not going to work out very well for anyone, right? That's just going to be a not a good thing. So looking from the bigger perspective of everything and everyone is conscious and always having that as your core view.
Okay, that makes sense. So, we've done a few lifetimes, probably a lot of lifetimes. So a lot of that is evolution of the soul of the one consciousness, right? So it's an ongoing process. So our human expression, this physicalness that we're in, which sometimes can be the ego, which you just mentioned, here in the West, our self-talk can be, we should deal with circumstances quickly and efficiently, right? So from a soul perspective, what might that process look like? I'm going to guess it should look a little different.
Yeah, I would say so I may be different than what others think or what others say, but I don't really think the soul is what's evolving. I think it's the human part is what's evolving. Like our our human expression of ourself as soul beings is what's evolving. That's how I see it. Like the soul's just perfect spirit as consciousness. It doesn't have a
Okay.
way to get better or worse. Humans have a lot of different choices that we can make as to how we respond to world events, how we want to create the world around us. So I think that's where the evolution is in the human response. I would guess that animals and plants and trees are also evolving, but they actually seem to have better choices than humans. So it's almost like we think humans are the top, but I kind of think humans are the bottom. Like we're the kindergartners in the grand scheme of how things are.
Well, that makes sense. And actually, thank you for that because I just humanized the soul, which is
Mm-hmm.
consciousness and all that is. So that's a really important, that was really important. So I will say in this involvement, I live on this farm and I have these goats. And I try to explain to people a lot of times they're very entertaining and lovely, but they consistently make bad choices that are not good for them. So I think that maybe we're right there with the goats sometimes with making the bad choices that I'm like, they're
Mm-hmm.
lovely, they're very lovely, but they make bad choices all the time.
Yeah.
I feel
Well,
like
if
all
you
the
were,
time is not an exaggeration.
yeah, like maybe the goat's challenge, like the goat's version of ego, not being a goat, but just is almost like their hunger or their belly or their food greed is their ego problem, whereas humans have different ego problems that
Yeah,
that
no,
they are working on.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, would you say like our current experiences that we're working through and our humanness is setting the groundwork for future healing? And when I think of it from that Western self-talk, could we be interfering with building a groundwork for future healing or future involvement?
I think that future healing is happening right now at a pretty accelerated pace. I think this is why we're having so much trouble in the waking up is because the healing is so active. I think a lot of the say we just look at human rights, like women's rights, gender's rights, racial equality, disability equality. I'm not using the right proper lingo, but all of those things are places where there were deep, deep, deep wounds, and all of that has somewhat been brought to the surface to look at and be healed and looked at. And so I think we're in the process of that deep, difficult assessment of what we've created thus far and looking at all the problems of what we created. And I think this work we're doing now, which is very uncomfortable, very challenging, very painful, but wasn't even being done 30 years ago or 40 years ago. We just weren't even looking at that stuff. I think this is where the evolution, like, I think if we look back 100 years from now, we're going to be like, oh, this was the time they were working on these major issues of human rights, ecological rights, and this is how we were able to create something that was more sustainable and better for everyone. If
So
it all goes,
it's a shift.
yeah, if it all goes
Okay.
well. I mean,
Well,
it could all go not well, but we don't. If it doesn't work out this time through, like these ideas don't go away. Once they permeate consciousness, they'll just keep coming back. Like there's only there's only one way forward, which is towards more oneness. So if we
right.
don't get it this time around, I hope we do, but if we don't, then we'll just do it the next time. This is just the continue phase.
And that makes sense to me, and I'm glad that because there's a lot of discussion out there where there's folks who think that everything's predetermined. It's all a
Yeah.
done deal. It's going to happen, and I'm like, you know, it's happen. You have to be in physicality to make it happen, which means there's a lot of wild cards in there. So I don't believe that it's predetermined or that it's a done deal. I think that there's a lot of, I think that we're stronger on the path than we've ever been in humanity. And we're making great strides, although it may not necessarily feel that sometimes in our humanness. But I don't think it's always just a done deal.
Well, one thing we have now that we didn't have before is just like this podcast or the ways that we can connect, online. We didn't have that before. And so
Even a few
that, like,
decades ago.
yeah, it just opened up everything where we can talk with people all over the world and instead of having these ideas like those people in this hemisphere are unknown to us or strangers, like, oh, they're the same as us, so why do we have these old beliefs around who was who or that kind of thing.
I agree. And just to sway off a little bit, there's a World Health Organization did a study on the loneliness epidemic. And they studied countries throughout the world, third world countries, the Western countries, and the information out of, and it was they had a really good population that they used for research, good N size, and the outcomes were identical in the countries as how it
Interesting.
affected the youth versus the older versus men and women. It was identical from a Western country to a third world country and countries across. It's a fascinating study. So when we even talk about the oneness, it can sound so abstract, but this loneliness epidemic is truly a global kind of situation. And when I read through the details of the research, I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. I think
Yeah.
like people would really be shocked by it. And a little bit of a segue there, but it just plays into we're not different. And it's
Yeah.
being put out there in a way that is palpable for people.
I would wonder too if, like, this idea of loneliness and this idea that we're in the shift, and if everyone's sort of waking up to this, they might not call it, they're waking up to this deeper hunger for connection to each other in a more real way, which, as opposed to how things are now, which is in a projected facade way. It's like, what about the real way? That's what
Yeah.
we really want.
Yep. It's powerful. And that is part of what this study shows is people are looking for deep connection with each other instead of being
Yeah.
separate, which is
Yeah.
what we talk about all the time. So, how can spiritual practices and living consciously shift a person out of those self limiting behaviors?
I think it's really good. Well, I sort of fancy myself as a mild disruptor or something like that, but I think it's really useful. At least it's been useful for me to not have a lot of shame or berating the self if I don't do practice as I'm supposed to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't sit on my meditation cushion 2 hours a day. I don't eat a vegan diet. I eat a vegetarian diet, but I'm not
Mm-hmm.
perfect at it. I don't know, all these ways that we're sort of presented with as this is the spiritual path. I haven't gone into the monastery for 10 years. I think it's important to find what resonates with each person and do those practices, especially at the beginning, that bring you like insane amounts of joy and feelings of wholeness in yourself. And for some people, it could be they like to go running. That might be, we don't think of that as spiritual practice, but it actually, it's complete trance. It's a complete journeying. It is spiritual practice while running. Other people might like to go to, in nature, or you might, this like, it could be anything. You might crochet, but it's this idea of doing the thing that you really enjoy that makes you feel connected. And don't worry if that's not, we've got dominant culture and then we've got the sort of the dominant spiritual culture, and like,
Yeah.
let go of that too. Like, you don't have to do things the way that as shown on YouTube or whatever you're
Yeah.
following. You just don't have to do it that way.
And I think that's important, and that's a lot of what the summit's about, spirituality explained, because I think it's becoming out there more and more that there's a specific framework and there's specific activities that you need to be practicing or be included. And I know meditation's a biggie for a lot of people and how they perceive it. Like I struggled with it. Oh, struggle's a word I try to remove from my vocabulary. But in the past, it was like I found it painful. I felt like I was a failure at it. And
Mm-hmm.
then I had someone say, well, you like love to sit at a bonfire in the backyard all the time and you just sit there and stare at it and you have peace. You're
Yeah.
meditating. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I am. And I
Mm-hmm.
started to think about it. And it's just what you said with the running and everything. Spirituality is personal. Meditation should be personal, just
Yeah.
like you described it. And it can be physical as well as
I
emotional
think,
and mental.
yeah, I think maybe the one thing to look for is anything that takes you into another dimension, like into trance, running, bonfire, meditation, music, and also anything that takes you, that lets your mind rest. So that, we talk about in meditation the monkey mind, but if you're running or dancing or playing an instrument, you're not having those thought. They just don't, there's no room. And so
Right.
looking for things where you're so completely absorbed in the flow of your being that the thoughts, so that might, if the thoughts are there, keep going in your practice. like go deeper and let the thoughts drift away. That's what we're looking for, a place where um, there isn't the mind, or there isn't the language, or there isn't the culture just sort of coming into your ear. um, this is a little tangential, but I've been teaching this sort of very modern shamanic course, and one of the things we did recently was we went journeying to discover our first self, our first human experience, or for some people, it was even an ET experience on Earth.
Oh,
And
wow.
we went so far back. We went to a place where we didn't have, I didn't really realize this was going to happen, but we didn't have language. We did not have thoughts yet because we were so early as humans. We had our sensations, we had our knowing and our awareness, and we didn't have language. And it's so interesting that language is, of course, this fabulous bridge, but it's also this fabulous sort of trap or loop. Like, it was very interesting to experience the being without language and feel what that was like. And I think almost that's kind of what we're seeking, the core connectivity to everything without the culture applied.
Wow, I think that that's actually pretty special. So, as we're talking about evolving our human selves, letting go of our issues and what no longer serves us, on our recent podcast, you said one of the things you highly recommended was letting go of drama, and that includes letting go in the mind.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you you just touched on that? Can you expand a little bit about how that might look for someone?
I think that all day long we're faced with situations. Somebody might be like, don't call them challenges, but I do call them, we're faced with things that sort of give us that feeling. And it is normal to have responses to stuff. That's normal. But it's helpful to not get too invested in most situations. Um, let's see. I just had an issue with a website where it was showing as it was down. And so I was on the chat with the support, like, help, my website has gone missing. Just like, okay, this is going to be like a
Okay.
mountain of work if that's what happens. And I was just sitting there, like, past me of multiple years ago would have just been freaking out in the la, la, la. And I just was like, this is interesting. I wonder what this is about. And okay. And then they were like, it's back up. It's all fixed. And I don't know that my lack of drama around that issue, just like, well, if that's what it is, um, fix the. I don't know how that all worked. It was not there, then it was there, and my reaction in between was just kind of like, this is interesting. I'm curious about why this is as it is now. Why is this showing up this way? I also don't have an answer. Like, I'm not applying drama as to trying to figure it out. I'm not, if I weren't telling this like as an illustration here, I wouldn't even discuss it. It'd just be, I wouldn't apply a whole lot of attachment to
Mm-hmm.
the happening, even though years ago I would have completely attached to the whole thing. I would have been dramatic about it. I would have told people about it. I would have panicked about it. And it's just like that all just, let's go. There are things where, say you had an accident or an illness, there are really serious things, and those are worthy of paying deep attention to and having proper response to. But most things aren't worthy of bothering with. They just aren't. They aren't worthy of the attention needed to make a decision about it.
Okay, that's interesting. As I was listening to you, I could totally relate as to my past self and my current self, and I'm always interested in my future iterations of what it looked like. And the first thing that came to mind as you were talking, it was almost like an aha of an observation. Gosh, look how far I've come, and I've evolved, and how much I've changed. And I think a lot of times we have those moments, but we don't connect that aha moment with it, that we
Mm-hmm.
would have done something different in the past. This is how we're doing it now.
Mm-hmm.
I seem to be okay with it. I'm not really sure why, but I'm not going to, spend the rest of my week pondering about it.
Yeah, and maybe it also, we have collectively been through, just with COVID, we've been through some pretty big collective trauma.
Yeah.
And maybe, you know, trauma and really difficult experiences change us and help us see what matters and what doesn't matter. What needs paying attention to and what doesn't.
Yes, it did. I would say
Yeah.
that escalated that for sure.
Yeah.
So when it comes to letting go on those types of topics, do you have tools that you like to work with to help with that, or
Mm-hmm.
that you would recommend?
I think with things like that, I'm always very much like, like things like that, or we often are in these positions where we're working with support people, like a website support, or someone who's pumping our gas, or someone who's delivering our package, or kind of the many encounters we have in modern life that aren't people we know necessarily, or maybe have never even seen or spoken to before. But I really take that step back and, like, this is an actual person with an actual life. I don't know their story or situation, and I'm going to be as kind and as respectful as I possibly can as we work through this problem together. And just that sort of shifts. I have a feeling people are not treated nicely at all, and just that shift of vibrational level. I'm not doing it to like make my problem get better service, like, at all. I'm just like, out of respect, like, this is a person with a home life and who knows what's going on, and I'm going to just be as kind as I can, and just so that's one tool. And then I guess the opposite would be when it's a serious issue, knowing when to let off the gas and knowing when to put your foot on the gas and go like crazy. Like, and I think this sense of, like, this idea of knowing where the energy is flowing and being able to pay attention to that, like, as you start to sense what's actually happening here, is this important, is this not important, But there are going to be times you yank the child out of the street as the car goes by. You have to take someone to the emergency room. All those types of things, and knowing when to act without hesitation, is sort of like this between the points is sort of where I try and just watching, noticing.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
this is like a beautiful segue into where I wanted to go next. So, when I was putting the summit together, Spirituality Explained, and really working with the different presenters that we've been working with, intuition repeatedly came up. And it was almost like I felt like the summit needed to be somehow titled Have Intuition in It, because it became a sort of a core element almost for everyone, and a direction and sort of how they wanted to present and what they wanted to do. And I thought, well, this is really interesting that intuition has really come to the forefront. I have to pay attention to that because
Mm-hmm.
it's clearly by universal design. It wasn't by my design.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you do Intuition University, and that
Mm-hmm.
you do a lot of work with intuition, and that you teach a lot with intuition. And it's sort of like one of your gigs, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk and share a little bit about intuition?
Yes, I think I've been doing it for a really long time now. And so as I'm also hearing more and more, I'm kind of like, this is weird, because I was working in this, 20 years ago or so, and now it's sort of um, coming up. And I think what I appreciate about my life is that I've had the time to really deeply explore a whole lot of intuitive techniques, and I've learned how to teach those to others. So it may be that intuition of the future takes a different shape, with younger generations or the way people approach it. But I'm just so grateful that I've had the experiences that I've had, like applying this to my life year after year after year. I think intuition is, instead of looking at, I'm a person with an ego, you're a person with your ego, and we could only connect by specifically talking, or writing. It's really, we sense each other completely. I can read you, you can read me, and accepting that we know each other completely, even if we don't, even if we've never met, and then working from that place of telepathy, feeling telepathy, and just always approaching it from that place. I mean, even the people with the biggest facades going on, all you have to do is just sort of relax and pay attention, and you just see them clearly away from their bravado, or whatever they're putting on. It could be bravado, it could be victimhood, it could be, you just kind of relax and like, show me the real person, and then that person just shows up, and then you're relating to that person instead of to the facade. It's kind of like we're all just taking our armor off suddenly all
Yeah.
together. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, some suggestions to help people get in touch with their intuition or to recognize or acknowledge it?
I think beginning to do some small, it's very easy to foresee the future. In some practices, there's that statement: the micro reflects the macro reflects the micro, and it's very easy to start playing little games. Like, say you're wondering, um, okay, let's say I didn't have a link for a podcast that was going to be in like 1 minute, and I needed to get on the podcast. So I might play a game with myself and go and look at some object. The next thing that catches my eye is going to show me how I'm going to get that link to that podcast. And I go stare at the yard, and a bird flies down with a leaf in its mouth. Now, this didn't actually happen. I'm just giving that as an example, but
Yeah.
we can take any situation and apply it to any other situation, and they will correlate. It's sometimes people will call it magical thinking. I think it's incorrect. I think magical thinking is how it really is. And we just need to learn to pay attention and notice this interconnectivity of nothing being random, of nothing being coincidental, of everything being connected and influencing everything else. And we can be a part of that whole view.
I'm 100% on board with that. You'll say random, not.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That everything is connected. And the more you pay attention to it, the more it becomes obvious to you.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a teacher, would you say that there's value in people who are looking to grow spiritually, or just, they're getting more information, they're dipping their toes in different things, to take some time to understand themselves a little bit more? So, for example, like I'm an empath, I'm an intuitive, I'm a sensitive, or maybe I'm a seeker, for example, so that they can connect with either the right teacher or the right content that resonates with it. So I think that things will resonate with people, but will understanding sort of where they come from help them be on a path that's going to best serve them?
I think there's lots of paths, and I don't think it has to be super fancy or even super. I think the minute you say, I want to open my spirituality or I want to open my intuition, the universe rushes in with, okay, here's 7 choices. We're just going to pop these into your lap or into your arms. I think it's all about this asking, like, I'm open to this. And um, I think that there's tons of great stuff on YouTube, podcasts, like that information. Not all of it's great. A lot of it's silly, but if you're going there and really feeling this deep heart glow, sort of, then you kind of know you're in the right spot. I think also things like listening to massive quantities of spiritual music is very, very opening. I just like to go on Spotify and put in, shamanic trance, high frequency, or just see what's there and sort of bathe yourself in those frequencies and those, like, music is some kind of sound nature. We haven't quite even understood how powerful it is. And just to have a lot of time in that, just relaxing, is very useful. Like, it will shift you. So I think the old idea might have been you have to go deep into your core wounds and sort of shovel through the yuckness, and you probably will have to do that at some point in your life, but you don't have to start there if that place feels too difficult. Like, I just can't do that now. I need something light to comfort me and lift me, and that's fine too.
So basically, don't make it hard.
Yeah, make it the easiest, make it the most effortless, and start there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that there will be a lot more coming out with the music and the sound and the vibration. I think we're in the beginning of this science being recognized and validated, and we're going to honestly see it as a huge healing
Yes.
tool. There's already a lot of information out there with things in the past, so I think it's going to totally shift many things, including healthcare
I
and
absolutely
treatment and
agree.
those kinds of things. So I thank you for bringing that up, because I believe it's that powerful and it's that accessible to everyone.
Yeah.
It's like right there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it will change. I think music or sound and light both together.
Hmm. Yep. So
Yeah.
this is going to be a little bit of a different question. So many people are yearning to awaken. They want to study. They're trying to understand the truth about themselves, their divinity, their magical, mystical areas of their existence. Do you think focusing too much on seeking can disturb the mind from letting go so true nature can emerge?
I think that if we get too attached to, so as an example, I used to really, really want to be a medium in my spiritual path. And medium is a person that receives the departed, like a Long Island medium. I just so much wanted to do that. And that's not actually my very strong gift. Sometimes it'll happen, but it's not my strength. While I was busy seeking how to figure out how to be a medium, channeling came in or clairvoyance came in. Those were easy as pie for me. I didn't even have to really try. So sometimes the seeking path, like we think we're going one way, and the universe is like, haha, we've got them on the path. Now we're going to slide them into their true, where they're really supposed to be. So I think seeking is great, and you should seek with whatever interests you, but don't get too attached to where you need to go. I sometimes run across people that have been doing this work a very long time that are really attached to what they've learned, the techniques. I don't know. I guess I just don't see it that way. I see it as I'll work with whatever works, but I'm not if something is old fashioned, I'm going to let that go. Or if something new is coming along, I'm very curious as to what that is. So not getting too, like, it's an egoic response to think, oh, I have all these certificates on my wall. That must mean I'm so awesome. It's like you're not only as awesome as you are in that exact moment. And awesome is not even really the question. It's just your curiosity and what's interesting you.
Curiosity and imagination, I think, are two of the key factors in our creating this new humanity, because we
Mm-hmm.
maybe need to shift the conversation a little bit more into that we are the creators. And
Mm-hmm.
to do that, we really need to embrace imagination and think of things that we never thought was even possible as possible, and
Mm-hmm.
working with that. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, I'm really I've been working with younger people more and more and more, and I really love their ability to collaborate creatively and just come up with this, like, sort of group solutions without even considering how it's a very, very different approach. It's rather, instead of me, ego, struggling through and making it all happen, it's like, oh, we're a group of friends, let's just do this thing, and it just happens instantly. And I think that's an example of sort of the new flow that's coming into place. They don't have, for that period of time that these younger groups are creating, they drop out of their individual ego and become a
Yeah.
group team. And that's like a microcosm of the bigger oneness we're
Mm-hmm.
trying to get to.
Yep. So I had a thought that I had lost right before that. You had said to me once that you can't force the universe. So when we were talking about the seeking and people being sort of stuck on that, what they're going to go down this path, or what it is they want, they're trying to force the universe. And I think that you felt pretty confidently that doesn't work so well.
Yeah, I mean, I think people can force their path and make it happen. That's kind of like the old manifesting style. I just think it's sort of missing the point. It's like, why force this path that isn't going to bring you what you're actually looking for? It's going to bring you your goal, but it's not going to bring you what you really think, what you really crave or really want or really need. So
Okay.
it's better to just sort of move toward your path and then notice how you're guided as you're on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other special tools or options you would say for seekers who are really looking from that getting started and have that just that high view from the soul's perspective.
I think accepting, if you're even asking the question, how can I become more spiritual? I need to change my life. I want to be an intuitive. I want to be a psychic reader. Just, you know, and those are different versions of the question. But if you're even looking at it, it's already happening. And so, again, like you don't have to try. The path is really easy, and there's many, many, many helpers on the way. I love that view of, you're walking up the mountain and then you meet various people on your travels who assist you, or you meet the friendly rabbit who gives you the magical food, or, it's kind of this fairy tale. But I love that idea that we're continually met by human helpers, energy helpers, beings. We aren't really doing this by ourselves. In fact, I don't think we can do it by ourselves. So trusting that the minute you start on the journey, oh, there's a helper, there's a helper, there's a helper, and just sort of, and then as you get farther along, you start to see these other people coming up the path, and then suddenly, like, you're the helper. Like, don't forget to pay it back. Don't forget. Okay. It's just like we're all helping each other get to the understanding that we can reach.
Okay, that makes sense with the all oneness. So what are you currently working on, and what's next for you?
I have just finished a book, a channeled book called The Gabriel Messages. It's not quite in paperback, but it will be by the time this comes out. That just came in a fugue state over many months. I just channeled it, and it was quite an interesting process to do. So that's just come out, and I am continuing to teach. But I'm working on doing quite a few books because I want to have the techniques that I teach and the channeling. I want to have it like super accessible and available. So I'm working on getting a lot of like back stuff out there so that it'll be available. Okay. For those who want the deep study. And if you don't want it, don't get it. But for those who are interested, it's going to be there.
Well, that's what's beautiful. There's a little bit of everything out there for anyone who's looking. And for you, you've been at this for 20 plus years. Yeah. You really do have a pretty big repertoire of tools and offerings. So if someone did want to work with you, what would that look like, and how did they get a hold of you?
They can reach me at sarawiseman.com, the website. And then there's courses, books, and then there's direct training that I teach. At this point, I'm teaching every semester, several groups. So there's quite a few options to look at.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. And I know that this was a tight week for you and that you were time limited with joining us on the summit. So real quick before we leave, I know we're not going to get into the Q&A with you because you have another commitment following up here. Last thoughts, insights, anything you want to leave with the viewers that are watching us?
I think you and I met, we did our Egypt trip together years ago and had a lot of interesting experiences there. So I trust that the people that are on the summit with you, and I just think it's going to be interesting. So I'm excited about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for fitting us in and joining us. I appreciate you, and I appreciate all you're doing for everyone, Sara. Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. Thanks.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Wild Soul Gatherings Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious. To learn more about our guests, please go to our website, wildsoulsgathering.com. We're very eager to hear from our listeners what you thought of the episode, topics you might like us to cover in the future, your thoughts on spirituality, questions you may have. Please feel free to send us an email at wildsoulsgathering@gmail.com. This is your host, Dr. Sandra Marie, sending each of you peace and love. Until we meet again, embrace your wild soul.